Nestled between the Athowart River, or John River, in the Oidigau Mountains, were once the 5 scattered tribes of Achotha. These tribes were Ushu, Juhijink, Damuk, Ithrud, and chief among them, Achotha itself. These tribes operated as a theocratic tribal oligarchy consisting of a council of 5 elders, one from each of the 5 tribes, who would govern from the small city of Achotha where the 2 rivers met. Each elder councillor had a degree of autonomy over their respective tribal group, leading to some differences and disagreements within the elder council, but overall, the 5 tribes remained united on account of their shared faith, the cult of Unima'u. This originally very niche religion believed in the god of Unima'u, an avian god of life and death, dusk and dawn, cycles, fire, birds, the sun, constraint and restrictions, and mediation between Achotha and the heavens. Unima'u was said to have lived on the top of Mount Chea'u, the highest mountain on Uthapaba, and that Unima'u was a silent god who refused to acknowledge or even communicate with his adherents. Nonetheless, early Achotha society practiced rites meant to communicate with and appease Unima'u, such as fire and bird rituals, animal sacrifices, fasting, communal prayer, the use of only warm colors, creating effigies of Unima'u, meditation, and asceticism. These rituals were all performed under the leadership of the Elder Council from the city of Achotha or occasionally at the feet of the Oidigau Mountains. South of Achotha, between the Zaki River and Horjan River, was the large tribal monarchy of Horjan. Horjan was a region dominated by a large tribal group with many smaller, lesser tribes who shared the cult of Unima'u's faith and customs. Despite the shared religion, culture, and similar geography, the people of Achotha looked down upon Horjan, viewing them as a lesser people and excluding them from their rituals. Yet Horjan still held an admiration for Achotha and a strong desire for relations closer than their mutual trade and a general lack of aggression. Outside of these 3 rivers in the Oidigau Mountains, neither Achotha or Horjan ever left, viewing these outside lands as cursed at most, and at least forbidden by their god. It is in this setting where a new era would begin. Born in Achotha, a young man named Ashekar had an ambitious dream: to climb Mount Chea'u, find Unima'u, and break the long-lasting silence of their god. Ashekar spent his early adulthood preparing for the perilous journey through treacherous and uncharted terrain, growing stronger, resourceful, and infamous. The Elder Council viewed Ashekar's ambitions as heretical and dangerous, so they exiled him to Horjan, whose people welcomed Ashekar with open arms and sought to help him in his quest. Ashekar eventually embarked on his quest to speak to Unima'u, which proved to be successful. Ashekar barely managed to reach the top of the world and speak to Unima'u, who was impressed by Ashekar. Unima'u rewarded Ashekar's efforts by granting him gifts of knowledge like metallurgy, writing, and new agricultural techniques, as well as teaching him a godly power known as Ufildma, which allowed him to summon the powers of the sun at his command to create fires, cast blinding lights, rapidly heal wounds, and quickly grow plants. With this new knowledge and ability, Ashekar returned down the mountain, returned to Achotha, displayed his gifts to the Elder Council, was thus crowned King Ashekar I of the 5 tribes of Achotha, and the Dawn Era was declared. This is the favorable mythic story, at least. There is another story now agreed upon by more realist scholars that stems from distant Achotha circles and is supported by parts of the Igorous, Aukink records, Achotha rumor, and the presence of the Ailake. The Ailake were one of the many small kingdoms of the Ualthu-Yurn, who, likely due to warfare with Aukink, fled the region and traveled southeast along the Oidigau Mountains until they reached the mountains bordering Achotha and Horjan. While in the mountains, the Ailake encountered Ashekar, in which a fight broke out between the Ailake's ruler and Ashekar. Ashekar won this battle, assumed control of the Ailake as per their tradition, and with the help of the Ailake, Ashekar marched into Achotha, seized control, and declared himself king. It's also generally agreed upon that Ufildma is not any sort of magical power, but that it is a form of inner enlightenment gained through self-reflection. Nothing about King Ashekar I's rise to power was religious in nature. It was just a result of luck and a military coup. Some theories even claim that King Ashekar I wasn't from Achotha, but that he was from Horjon or always one of the Lake. No matter how King Achotha I rose to power, upon becoming king and declaring the Dawn Era, he began making sweeping reforms to Achotha. The Elder Council was made to be a subservient religious position, and the different leaders acted as smaller local governments between King Achotha I and the 5 tribes. Mines, quarries, and smiths were opened in the mountains, farms and irrigation spread across the land, new roads and towns were created, a phonetic alphabet and writing system was created for the Achotha and Horjon languages, and literacy increased significantly. Of these accomplishments, the insistence on literacy in writing were both King Achotha I's greatest triumph and greatest failures. Within Achotha and all of its Salaspora, literacy and education has always been substantially higher thanks to this initial precedent, but it did not come without its issues. King Achotha I made sure to write down many of the local oral traditions of Achotha, especially many of the religious teachings and rituals of the Elder Council. These writings became the basis for the Igorist, the holy book of the cult of Unima'u, which King Achotha I sought to make available and understandable for everyone. Achotha also began writing his own story down, including much of his mythic rise to power, the teachings of Unima'u, and knowledge of Ufieldma. The writings done specifically by Achotha were controversial, with the Elder Council claiming that his words were not divinely inspired and that he had no business putting his own fantasies into the Igorist. This religious dispute is what made the already poor relationship between King Achotha I and the Elder Council into an irreversible feud. The Elder Council began disobeying King Achotha I's every order, instead ruling their respective tribe on their own, and often outright doing the opposite of what Achotha decreed, even against their own interests, simply out of spite. In the 23rd year of the Dawn Era, King Achotha I had enough of the Elder Council, so he left to Horjon, where he was once again welcomed and became their king, officially annexing Horjon into Achotha. Though king of both Achotha and Horjon, in practicality, King Achotha I had very little to do with Achotha governance past the 23rd year, and instead he put all of his focus on building up Horjon, who accepted him and his writings in the Igorist without issue, splitting the 2 peoples and the cult of Unima'u firmly in half. Before Achotha, the people of Horjon were generally less advanced than Achotha, but after his leadership, Horjon's infrastructure and literacy grew enough to rival and even overtake Achotha. The city of Horjon was founded in similar fashion to the city of Achotha, right where the Zaki River and Horjon River met, and it grew to rival the much older Achotha city. The success of Horjon and their religious differences led to increased issues from the Elder Council, such as small conflicts over mining and fishing on the borders between them, and a very suspicious pattern of King Achotha I's lovers and children dying suspiciously or outright disappearing continuously throughout the rest of his life. After unifying Achotha and Horjon, starting the Dawn Era, and in many ways uplifting his people, King Achotha I died of natural causes within Horjon in the 44th year of the Dawn Era. Without an heir, the rulership of both Achotha and Horjon returned to the Elder Council, who happily moved to rule over them both. But as they resumed control over the region, a new voice rang out from the slums of Horjon. This new voice from Horjon claimed to be the illegitimate bastard child of King Achotha I, who was born in secret away from the plots of the Elder Council so that he may live and claim the throne of Achotha and Horjon after the death of his father. The Elder Council and Achotha at large shunned this idea, finding it laughable and foolish and believing this new Achotha to be an opportunistic charlatan. But the people of Horjon were quick to back this new Achotha out of love of King Achotha I and a want for a new king and a representative of their own, away from the Elder Council that continued to be openly hostile to Horjon. The Horjon people proclaimed him King Achotha II and put him in charge of Horjon. The actions of Horjon and the supposed King Achotha II began to enrage the Elder Council, who in response sent soldiers across the Horjon River into Horjon to depose of the second Achotha. These soldiers got intercepted by Horjon guards, and a fight ensued on the bridge over the Horjon River, starting the first battle of what would become the Achotha Civil War. The initial half of the Achotha Civil War was a major success for Horjon, including the first battle. The armies of Horjon, the Lake, and King Achotha II made many successful moves by prioritizing conquering the mountainous regions to take complete control of metals before spreading down to Acal's major city. Horjon was also first to employ a priestly caste of warriors known as battle priests, who proved to be very effective combatants and medics in the war. As Horjon began to get closer to their goal of Acal's capital, they started to face major issues. Horjon didn't have enough soldiers to occupy their conquered lands, and small militias and guerrilla forces began actively causing trouble, including destroying Acal's fields, starving out the Horjon people. By the time the armies of Horjon got close enough to the city of Acal, they had lost too many people to effectively fight further, and their logistics stalled. All of the initial momentum of Horjon faded out right at the end of their goal, and they began getting pushed back. Instead of retaking all of Acal and Horjon, the remaining armies of Acal prioritized crossing the river and destroying the capital of Horjon with full force in a bid to stop the war quickly. As Horjon was encircled and put under siege, King Achotha II surrendered, hoping to give himself up to spare the city and the rest of Horjon. The Elder Council accepted the surrender of King Achotha II, and as punishment, the Elder Council took King Achotha II and all his followers, and as per ancient tradition, exiled them from Acal and Horjon. As King Achotha II and his followers left south across the Horjon River and into the desert following the Achotha River, the Elder Council, presumably to spite this self-proclaimed Achotha II and to punish Horjon, burnt the city to the ground. The last thing King Achotha II ever saw of Horjon was the city burning to ash and his people screaming. Come the end of the Acal Civil War in the 52nd year, the Elder Council was now able to take full control of Acal and Horjon without opposition. The Elder Council was quick to begin reconstruction of Acal, working on rebuilding homes and industries and allocating remaining food stores. The Elder Council was not as lenient with Horjon. After their city was burnt to the ground, the Elder Council sent soldiers to police over them and nothing else. Horjon was left to rebuild itself without help and without adequate leadership. Horjon quickly began to get stuck behind Acal, never matching their progress and becoming impoverished compared to their neighbors. The people of Horjon were also unrepresented in the government, and any of their leaders that began to rise up were quickly put down. Any Horjon leaders learned to keep themselves small, and its everyday people learned to keep their opinions to themselves. This is also one of the catalysts for the rise of Horjon secret societies, the start of their culture of secrecy, and the beginning of Horjon occultism in the form of contraband versions of the Igorith. The Ilaik also became an outcast and persecuted people. Most of the Ilaik fled deep into the Ortegal Mountains nearby Horjon to escape persecution and conflict with Acal. However, some of the Ilaik stayed within Horjon, primarily within the city of Akag, as a discriminated minority. For many decades, the Horjon and Ilaik people remained oppressed and weakened as a vassal state, leading to resentment and shifting cultures that would clash throughout the Dawn era. The conflict regarding King Achotha II's reign and validity is also what defined the relationship and cultures of Acal and Horjon for the rest of history.